The first sign wasn't the dying whales washing ashore along California's coast, their bloated corpses staining the sand black. It wasn't even the massive algae blooms that turned the Pacific into a writhing carpet of toxic green death. The first sign was Admiral Kestrel Vance watching her coffee cup ripple in perfect concentric circles as something vast moved beneath the seafloor of the Mariana Trench. "Ma'am, we're getting seismic readings that don't make sense," Lieutenant Commander Brass Hendricks reported from his station aboard the ONS Leviathan. The ocean-class dreadnought hung suspended in the crushing darkness, 11 kilometers below sea level, its bioluminescent hull panels casting ethereal blue light through the Absol waters. Vance set down her cup and studied the holographic display. The readings showed something enormous larger than Manhattan shifting beneath the ocean floor. But what made her blood freeze wasn't the size. It was the pattern. Too regular, too purposeful. "Time to surface contact?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer would change everything. 17 minutes, ma'am. But Admiral. Hendricks paused, his weathered face pale in the blue glow. "The water chemistry readings are off the charts. Toxicity levels are climbing exponentially. Whatever's down there is pumping something into the water." Through the Leviathan's transparent aluminum viewports, Vance could see her fleet. 47 ocean-class vessels, humanity's greatest secret, designed for warfare in the crushing depths where no conventional navy could operate. Each ship was a kilometer long, their hulls forged from pressure-resistant metamaterials and powered by fusion. Cores that had never seen sunlight dot for 30 years, they'd waited in the deep places, while the surface world built space navies and orbital defense platforms. A select few had prepared for threats from below. The Abyss Initiative had been mocked by politicians and dismissed by conventional military brass, but Admiral Marcus Deepwater Vance's predecessor had been a visionary who understood that 3/4 of Earth's surface remained humanity's greatest vulnerability. Now those mock preparations might be all that stood between Earth and extinction. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission," Communications Officer Reef Nakamura announced. It's not human origin." The message that crackled through the speakers was translated by their xenolinguistics AI, but the contempt in the alien voice needed no translation. "Surface dwellers of the third planet, your oceans now belong to the Hadal Collective. The biochemical conversion has begun. Your seas will become our breeding pools. Surrender your coastal cities, and your species may survive as aquaculture. Stock." Vance smiled, but it was the smile of a deep-sea predator. "Reef, open a channel to the entire fleet. Full battle encryption." As her words echoed through the abyss to 47 hidden dreadnoughts, she could almost hear the alien confidence beginning to crack. They'd chosen to poison Earth's oceans, thinking humanity was just another surface-bound species. They were about to learn why humans had always been the ocean's apex predator. "All stations, this is Admiral Vance, condition black. Repeat, condition black. The deep is no longer ours alone, but by God, we'll make them pay for every drop of water they've contaminated. Battle stations, ascend to engagement depth, and remember they poison our home. Show them what happens when you threaten the children of a water world." Through the darkness, the ocean began to glow as humanity's secret guardians powered up their weapons and prepared to defend the depths that had birthed their species 4 billion years ago. The Hadal Collective's first mistake was assuming they were the apex predators of the deep. Their second mistake was revealing themselves to Admiral Vance's forward scout, the ONS Absol Reaper. While it was conducting reconnaissance in the Puerto Rico Trench, Captain Torrent Blackfin had been running, silent, using passive sensors only, when the ocean floor erupted in a geyser of superheated water and bioluminescent slime. What emerged defied classification, a writhing mass of flesh and metal that stretched 3 kilometers from end to end, covered in sensory tendrils that pulsed with alien intelligence. "Contact designated Kraken 1, Blackfin reported to the Fleet Net. Configuration unknown. Definitely hostile intent. It's Jesus Christ. It's heading straight for the surface." The alien vessel, if it could be called that, moved with impossible grace through the crushing depths, its flesh metal hull rippling like a living thing. Bioluminescent patterns raced across its surface in complex sequences that hurt to look at directly. "Reaper, you are weapons free." Admiral Vance's voice crackled through the quantum entanglement communicator. "Show them what an ocean class can do." Blackfin grinned, revealing teeth that had been replaced with titanium steel alloy, a common modification among deep-sea sailors. "Aye, ma'am. All hands, battle stations, Flood torpedo tubes 1 through 20. Load Absol hammers. The Reaper's hull transformed as armor plating slid away to reveal weapons systems. Designed for warfare in the crushing deep, unlike surface torpedoes, Absol hammers were guided by quantum processors and armed with microfusion warheads specifically designed to maintain their devastating yield under extreme pressure. Target acquired, range 8,000 meters and closing. Firing solution locked. Fire when ready. Captain. 20 streaks of death lance through the black water, their wakes creating brief constellation patterns in the bioluminescent plankton. The alien vessel seemed to sense the incoming threat. Its tendrils writhed frantically, and strange energy fields began forming around its hull. The first 10 torpedoes struck what appeared to be some kind of bioelectric shield. Brilliant flashes lit up the trench as fusion fire met alien energy, creating pressure waves that would have crushed any surface vessel like an empty can. But the remaining 10 Absol hammers punched through. The explosions were magnificent and terrible. Fusion fire bloomed like newborn stars in the depths, and the alien vessel scream transmitted through both water and some kind of psychic channel made half of Blackfin's crew clutch their heads in agony. Direct hits, reported weapons officer Ridge Tempest. But sir, it's still moving, and it's launching something. What the alien vessel launched looked like a cloud of living mercury, thousands of smaller entities that moved with predatory purpose toward the Reaper. Each was about the size of a human, with no fixed shape, constantly flowing between configurations. Point defense systems, now, Blackfin ordered. The Reaper's hull bristled with closing weapons systems, plasma cutters designed for clearing debris, repurposed into defensive weapons. Streams of superheated matter carved through the water, vaporizing dozens of the approaching entities. But there were hundreds more, and they were learning, adapting their approach patterns to avoid the defensive fire. "They're boarding us," Tempest announced with the calm professionalism of a career deep-sea warrior. Hull breaches on deck 7 through 12, through the ship's internal monitors. Blackfin watched his crew engage the invaders with the brutal efficiency that made ocean-class Marines legendary. These weren't the ceremonial guards of surface navies. They were fighters bred for the darkness, equipped with high-pressure combat suits and weapons designed to function in flooded compartments. Marine Captain Kelp Morrison led the defense, her squad moving through the ship's corridors like deadly shadows. The aliens flowed through the smallest gaps, but when they encountered human resistance, they learned why Earth's deep-sea predators had evolved to be so ruthlessly efficient. "Use the pressure protocols," Morrison ordered. Her Marines activated emergency seals, then deliberately breached the outer hull. The sudden pressure differential sucked several alien entities out into the crushing depths. While her pressure-adapted humans barely noticed the change, but the battle was just beginning. More alien vessels were rising from the deep places, and Admiral Vance was about to discover that humanity's enemies had been preparing for this war far longer than anyone imagined. The Pacific Rim burned with bioluminescent fire as the Hadal Collective's full assault began. Within 6 hours of first contact, 12 major cities reported their harbors turning the color of infected blood. Tokyo Bay, San Francisco, Sydney, all hemorrhaging a toxin that killed everything it touched while somehow remaining perfectly clear to human eyes until it was too late. Admiral Vance stood in the Leviathan's command center, watching tactical displays that showed a nightmare unfolding across the globe's oceans. The enemy wasn't just in the Pacific, they were everywhere. "Ma'am, we're receiving distress calls from 16 ocean-class vessels," reported Commander Hendricks. "The enemy, they knew where we were, every major trench, every deep water station. They hit us simultaneously." The tactical display showed red icons marking lost vessels. The ON's depth charge had gone dark in the Atlantic Ridge. The pressure drop was venting atmosphere somewhere in the Indian Ocean depths. Worst of all, the ON's Hadean, humanity's most advanced ocean-class vessel, had been overrun while investigating the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. "How many crew lost?" Vance asked, though the numbers felt like physical blows. "Conservative estimate, 43,000, ma'am, and rising." Vance closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of every soul lost in the crushing darkness. These weren't just sailors, they were the children of generations who had adapted to life in the deep, their genetics modified, their culture shaped by the abyss. Each loss was irreplaceable. "Mom," Communications Officer Nakamura interrupted. "Incoming priority transmission from Surface Command." The holographic image of Fleet Admiral Coral Deepsong materialized, her features haggard. "Vance, the situation topside is deteriorating rapidly. The toxin isn't just killing marine life, it's evaporating into the atmosphere. Coastal cities are reporting mass casualties. We need those waters cleared, and we need it now. Ma'am, with respect, we're fighting for our lives down here. The enemy has vessels the size of aircraft carriers, and they're using weapons we don't. Understand, energy fields that can deflect fusion torpedoes. Biological warfare that targets our life support systems. I don't care if they have sea monsters. And magic, Deep Song interrupted. The president is considering nuclear options. If you can't stop them, she'll glass the ocean floors to save the surface. The channel closed, leaving Vance staring at her remaining fleet. 31 ocean-class vessels against an enemy that had been preparing for this war longer than humanity had existed. Captain Blackfin, report, she ordered. The Absol Reapers. Commander appeared on screen, his face streaked with blood and his titanium teeth gleaming. Ma'am, we've identified their weakness. The big ones, the Kraken-class vessels, they're not just ships. They're living colonies, and living things can be poisoned. Explain. We captured one of their boarding entities. Medical officer Tide Van Houten performed a dissection. They're silicon-based, but they still require specific chemical processes. To maintain cellular cohesion, we've synthesized a compound that disrupts those processes. Vance leaned forward. What kind of compound? Ironically, ma'am, it's based on terrestrial deep-sea bacteria, the kind that lives around hydrothermal vents. We've weaponized our own ocean's chemistry against them for the first time in hours. Vance smiled. Can you manufacture enough for fleet deployment? Already in production, ma'am, but there's a catch. Someone has to get close enough to deploy it, and I mean close. Within 50 meters of their primary vessels, Vance studied the tactical display. The enemy was massing for what appeared to be a final assault on the remaining human strongholds. Massive Kraken-class vessels were rising from oceanic trenches. Worldwide, supported by swarms of smaller entities. Very well. Fleet orders. All remaining vessels are to converge on grid reference Deep 77 Alpha. We're going to make a stand at the Mariana Trench, Mum, Hendricks objected. That's where this all started. Intelligence suggests it's their primary staging area. We'll be outnumbered 20-1, then we better make sure we take 20 of them with us, Vance replied, and Commander, prep the Absol spears for manual deployment. If we're going to die in the deep, we're taking their entire command structure with us. As her orders propagated through the fleet network, Vance allowed herself one moment of human doubt. They were about to attempt the most desperate naval action in human history, fought in conditions that would crush surface vessels like paper bags. But they were ocean class. They had been born for this. The Mariana Trench had become a graveyard of giants. Admiral Vance watched through the Leviathan sensor rays as her remaining 28 vessels descended into the deepest place on Earth, where pressure could flatten mountains and darkness was absolute. Here, 11 kilometers below the surface, the Hadal Collective had built something that defied human understanding. Ma'am, you need to see this, reported Lieutenant Commander Brass Hendricks. His voice tight with horror. The tactical display revealed the truth. The aliens hadn't just invaded Earth's oceans. They'd been here for millennia, building a vast underground complex that stretched across the Pacific floor. Kilometers of biomechanical structures pulsed with alien life, connected by tubes that pumped the toxic compounds into Earth's waters. Population estimate, Vance asked. Conservative, 2 million entities. And ma'am, they're not just soldiers. We're reading what appear to be nurseries, breeding chambers. This isn't an invasion, it's a colonization. The implications hit like a physical blow. While humanity had spent centuries looking to the stars for alien life, an entire civilization had been growing beneath their feet, waiting for the right moment to claim the planet's most precious resource. Fleet positions. All vessels are at maximum depth, ma'am. The enemy hasn't detected us yet, but that won't last. Their patrol vessels are everywhere. Captain Blackfin's voice crackled through the quantum comm. Admiral, we've got the bacterial weapon ready for deployment, but we need to get it into their central processing facility. That structure dead ahead, the one that looks like a massive jellyfish made of metal. Vance studied the target. The facility was 3 kilometers across, its tentacle-like appendages reaching into dozens of processing chambers where the ocean's chemistry was being systematically altered. It was defended by at least 50 Kraken-class vessels and thousands of smaller entities. We'll need a diversion, she decided. Something big enough to draw their forces away from the central facility. Ma'am, came a new voice. Captain Reef Darkwater of the ONS pressure cooker. My ship took heavy damage in the last engagement. We're venting atmosphere, and our fusion core is fluctuating. We won't make it back to the surface. Vance understood. Immediately, Captain, are you requesting permission to yes, ma'am? My crew and I volunteer for final deployment. We'll ram their largest vessel, detonate our core on impact, should give you the diversion you need. The sacrifice was enormous. The pressure cooker carried 800 souls, all volunteers, who had signed their lives over to defending Earth's oceans. But their gesture would save millions on the surface. Permission granted, Captain. May the deep embrace you as heroes. What followed was the most brutal 15 minutes in naval history. The pressure cooker emerged from the trench wall like an avenging angel, her damaged hull ablaze with emergency lighting. As she accelerated toward the largest Hadal vessel, a monstrosity 5 kilometers long that pulsed with bioluminescent command patterns, the enemy response was immediate and devastating. Energy weapons that turned water into plasma carved through the darkness, striking the pressure cooker again and again. Her armor plating vaporized under the assault, exposing internal decks to the crushing depths. But Captain Darkwater's crew had been born for this. Even as their ship died around them, they maintained course and speed. Marine squads fought hand-to-hand with boarding entities in flooding compartments. Engineers manually maintained the fusion core even as radiation levels climbed toward lethal for Earth. Darkwater's final transmission rang through the fleet as the pressure cooker struck the alien command vessel at full velocity. The fusion core detonation lit up the Mariana Trench like a second sun. The explosion vaporized millions of tons of water, creating a cavitation bubble that collapsed with the force of a tectonic event. The alien command vessel simply ceased to exist, along with a dozen smaller craft. In the chaos that followed, as enemy forces rushed toward the explosion, Admiral Vance executed the most audacious attack in human history. All vessels, attack. Pattern Delta 7. Target the processing facility. Get our people close enough to deploy the bacterial weapon. 27 ocean-class dreadnoughts burst from concealment like deep-sea predators, their hulls blazing with weapons fire. Absol hammers streaked through the water in deadly precision strikes. Plasma cutters carved through alien flesh metal hulls. The darkness of the deep became a light show of destruction. But the enemy fought back with equal fury. Their weapons were biological horrors, living torpedoes that sought out human vessels. With predatory intelligence, acid clouds that ate through even metamaterial armor, and boarding entities that could phase through solid matter. The On's deep current took a direct hit that severed her forward section. The Absol Hunter was overwhelmed by a swarm of phase entities that materialized inside her command center. One by one, humanity's greatest vessels died in the crushing darkness, but they died fighting, and their sacrifice brought 3 ships close enough to the processing facility to deploy Captain Blackfin's biological weapon. As Earth's own bacteria began eating through the alien infrastructure, Admiral Vance realized they had won a battle. But the war was far from over. The bacterial weapon worked faster than anyone had dared hope. Within minutes of deployment, the alien processing facility began to dissolve from within as Earth's own extremophile. Bacteria weaponized and enhanced consumed the silicon-based structures that had poisoned the world's oceans. But the Hadal Collective's response was swift and merciless. Ma'am, we've got massive signatures rising from the deep trenches worldwide, reported Communications Officer Nakamura, her voice tight with controlled panic. Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, Arctic, they're all mobilizing. Admiral Vance watched the tactical display with growing horror. Hundreds of massive contacts were ascending from oceanic depths, each one dwarfing the largest vessels humanity had ever constructed. The enemy had been holding back their true strength, and now desperation had forced them to reveal it. Fleet status, she demanded. 18 vessels remaining operational. Ma'am, 7 more are combatant effective, but still mobile. We've lost 60% of our fighting strength. The numbers were devastating, but not unexpected. The ocean-class fleet had been designed for stealth operations and surgical strikes, not full-scale warfare against an established civilization. Every ship lost represented decades of construction and thousands of lives. Admiral, Captain Blackfin's voice crackled through the calm. We're detecting something new. The bacterial weapon is working, but it's also changing them. The surviving aliens are adapting faster than we anticipated. On the main display, the dying processing facility writhed as its biomechanical components fought against the invasive bacteria, but some sections were successfully adapting. incorporating Earth's own microorganisms into their structure. The enemy was literally evolving in real time. New contacts bearing 0 Mark 7, elevation rising fast. Tactical Officer Ridge Tempest announced, designating as Leviathan class. Estimated length, 12 kilometers. 12 kilometers. The approaching vessel was larger than most cities, a living mountain of flesh and metal rising from the abyssal depths. As it ascended, smaller craft detached from its hull like spawning fish, hundreds of them, each the size of a conventional submarine. All vessels, this is Admiral Vance. We are engaging a Leviathan-class entity. Priority target is the command nexus, those pulsing structures along its dorsal surface. Weapons free. Show them why Earth's predators rule the deep. The battle that followed redefined naval warfare. The On's Leviathan led the charge, her fusion-powered engines driving her through the crushing depths at speeds that should have been impossible. Her main guns, particle beam cannons designed for asteroid mining, repurposed for war, carved brilliant lines through the alien's hull. Each hit vaporized thousands of tons of biomechanical tissue. But the creature's sheer size made such wounds mere pinpricks. The alien response was immediate and overwhelming. The Leviathan-class entity's hull opened like a flower, revealing weapons that hurt to look at directly. Energy beams that existed in dimensions human minds could barely comprehend lanced out, striking the depth seeker amidships. The Ocean-class vessel simply folded in on itself, crushing 800 souls in an instant. Evasive maneuvers, Vance ordered, but in the crushing depths, maneuverability was limited. The Ocean-class ships were built for endurance and firepower, not dogfighting. Captain Torrent Blackfin's Abyssal Reaper dove beneath the alien Leviathan, using its own massive bulk for cover as he targeted the creature's apparent weak points. Firing Abyssal spears, he reported, if this thing bleeds, we can kill it. The Abyssal spears were humanity's most devastating deep-sea weapons-guided fusion warheads that could penetrate any known material. 6 of them struck the alien entity's command nexus simultaneously, creating a chain reaction that lit up the ocean floor. The Leviathan-class entity's death scream was audible through the water itself, a sound that made every human within 50 kilometers clutch their heads in agony. As it died, its massive bulk began to sink, threatening to crush the human vessels fighting in its shadow. But its death had triggered something worse. "Ma'am," Nakamura reported, her face pale with terror. "We're getting readings from every major trench on the planet. They're all coming up. Every last one of them." The tactical display showed the true scope of humanity's predicament. Dozens of Leviathan-class entities were rising from oceanic depths worldwide, supported by thousands of smaller vessels. The Hadal Collective had revealed their true strength, and it was overwhelming. Fleet Admiral Deep Song on Priority Channel, Nakamura announced. The holographic image showed a woman pushed beyond her limits. "Vance, the surface situation is critical. The toxin release has accelerated. We're losing coastal cities by the hour. The president has authorized nuclear deployment if you can't stop them in the next hour. Man, if you nuke the ocean floors, you'll kill every remaining ocean-class vessel. That includes the crews adapting the bacterial weapon. Acceptable losses." Deep Song replied coldly, "Save the species, Admiral. That's an order." As the channel closed, Vance stared at her remaining fleet, 11 functional vessels against hundreds of alien giants. The mathematics were impossible, but mathematics had never stopped humans before. All vessels, prepare for final engagement protocols. We're going to ram every one of these bastards, and we're going to make them remember why they should never have poisoned our world. The deep places of Earth were about to witness humanity's finest hour. Admiral Kestrel Vance had 93 minutes before the surface fleet turned Earth's oceans into radioactive glass. 11 ocean-class vessels faced an armada that defied comprehension. 47 Leviathan-class entities, rising from trenches across the globe, each supported by swarms of smaller craft that numbered in the thousands. But in those final minutes, humanity remembered what had made them the apex predators of a water world. "Admiral," reported Captain Blackfin from the heavily damaged Abyssal Reaper, "the bacterial weapon is still spreading, but too slowly. We need to accelerate the process." "How?" Vance demanded, watching as another ocean-class vessel, the pressure wave, disappeared under a coordinated assault from a dozen alien craft. "We rammed the primary breeding facility with our entire remaining fleet. Simultaneous fusion core detonations will create a pressure wave that spreads the bacteria across the entire Pacific floor in minutes instead of hours." The implications were clear. Every remaining ocean-class vessel would be destroyed. Every crew member would die. But their sacrifice might poison the alien infrastructure fast enough to save Earth's surface. Captain, are you asking me to order the suicide of 10,000 people? No, ma'am. I'm asking you to let 10,000 people save 8 billion. Through the fleet communications network, voices began responding before Vance could reply. Captain, Reef Darkwater's successor on the Deep Current, we volunteer. Captain Kelt Morrison, now commanding the pressure drop. Admiral, for Earth. One by one, every remaining vessel confirmed their willingness to die. But before Vance could give the order, Lieutenant Commander Hendricks made an announcement that changed everything. Mom, I'm detecting massive seismic activity along the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Something's happening down there. The tactical display shifted to show the Atlantic depths. Where sensors detected an impossibility, massive structures were rising. From beneath the ocean floor, structures that were unmistakably human in design. What am I looking at? Vance demanded. Ma'am, came a new voice on the communications channel, one that made Vance's blood freeze. This is Admiral Marcus Deepwater, commanding the Deep Fleet Reserve. Sorry we're late to the party. Marcus Deepwater had been declared dead 3 years ago when his expedition to map the deepest ocean trenches had disappeared. But now his voice was coming from the Atlantic depths, and the structures rising from the ocean floor were clearly human vessels, but unlike anything in the official fleet registry. Marcus, where the hell have you been? Vance demanded. Building, Admiral. Building and preparing. When we discovered the alien infrastructure 3 years ago, we realized the ocean-class fleet wouldn't be enough. So we went deeper, much deeper. What emerged from the Atlantic depths redefined humanity's mastery of the ocean. The vessels were enormous, each one larger than the alien Leviathan-class entities, but still recognizably human in design. Their hulls were grown rather than built, using bioengineering techniques that fused human technology with deep-sea biology. How many vessels? Vance asked. 6 to 7 deep fleet ships, each one capable of operating in conditions that would crush conventional ocean-class hulls. We've been living down here for 3 years, adapting, evolving. The crews have been genetically modified for extreme deep-sea operations. The tactical display showed the impossible. Humanity had built a secret fleet in the deepest places of Earth, crewed by people who had voluntarily transformed themselves into something beyond baseline human to defend their species. Admiral Vance, Deepwater continued, we've been monitoring your engagement. The bacterial weapon was brilliant, but it needs a delivery system that can reach every alien facility simultaneously. We have that capability. What followed was the most coordinated naval operation in human history. The deep fleet vessels moved through the ocean depths like living things, their biomechanical hulls allowing them to navigate crushing pressures that would destroy conventional ships. Each carried massive loads of the enhanced bacteria, weaponized and ready for global deployment. Meanwhile, Vance's remaining ocean-class fleet engaged the alien forces in a desperate holding action. The Absol Reaper led a charge against 3 Leviathan-class entities, her fusion cannons carving deep wounds in their biomechanical hulls. The Deep Current used her damaged condition as an advantage, venting atmosphere and coolant to create a debris cloud that masked her approach to a major alien command vessel. But it was Captain Kelt Morrison who achieved the impossible. Her vessel, the pressure drop, had been written off as combatant effective after losing half her hull to alien weapons. But Morrison used her ship's structural damage as a weapon, allowing enemy boarding entities to flood her vessel while her Marines led them into a carefully prepared trap. All boarding entities are concentrated in forward sections, Morrison reported, sealing blast doors and venting to space in 3, 2, 1. The pressure drop's forward hull blew out like a massive shotgun, firing hundreds of alien entities into the crushing depths at velocities that turned them into biological shrapnel. The technique was immediately adopted by other damaged vessels, turning their wounds into weapons. As the Deep Fleet completed their bacterial deployment across the globe's ocean floors, the alien infrastructure began collapsing. But the Hadal Collective's final gambit was their most desperate. They began ramming their largest vessels directly into human population centers on the surface. Surface impact in 43 minutes, reported tactical. Target appears to be the eastern seaboard. Vance made the hardest decision of her career. All remaining vessels, pursue and intercept. We're going to the surface. The ascent from the Mariana Trench to Earth's surface normally took 6 hours for an ocean-class vessel. Admiral Kestrel Vance's battered fleet made it in 97 minutes, their hulls screaming under the pressure differential. As they climbed through 11 kilometers of increasingly hostile water, above them, a dying Leviathan-class entity 12 kilometers of alien flesh and metal was rising toward the surface, with the clear intention of crushing New York City under its massive bulk. The creature was hemorrhaging biomechanical fluid from dozens of wounds, but its momentum would carry it through the surface and into the heart of Manhattan. Fleet status, Vance demanded as the Leviathan breached the 6-kilometer mark. 7. Vessels still functional, ma'am, reported Lieutenant Commander Hendricks. But we're losing hull integrity fast. These ships weren't designed for rapid ascent. Through the Leviathan's viewports, they could see the alien entity above them, a mountain of living metal that pulsed with dying bioluminescence. Its tentacle-like appendages, each one larger than a skyscraper, writhed in the water as it climbed toward the surface. Time to surface impact? Vance asked. 18 minutes, ma'am. 18 minutes to save 8 million lives. Captain Blackfin. Status of the Absol Reaper. Hull integrity at 40%, ma'am. But we've still got teeth. Even over the communication channel, she could hear the grim determination in his voice. Permission to engage. Granted. All vessels. Converge on target. This is our last shot. What followed was the most desperate naval engagement in human history, fought in the crushing transition zone between the deep ocean and the surface world. The remaining ocean-class vessels, their hulls cracking under pressure differentials they were never designed to handle, attacked the alien entity with everything they had. The Absol Reaper led the charge, her plasma cutters carving deep wounds in the creature's hide. The deep current, barely holding together, used her remaining Absol hammers to target what appeared to be the entity's propulsion organs. But the creature was enormous. Their weapons were like needles against an elephant. Then Admiral Marcus, Deepwater's voice crackled through the communication channels. Vance, we're on our way up. Can you hold position for 3 minutes? Well, hold, Vance replied, though she wasn't sure how. The alien entity's response to their attack was to release thousands of smaller organisms living projectiles that sought out the human vessels with predatory intelligence. The pressure drop was overwhelmed first. Her hull breached in 17 places as the organisms burrowed through her armor. Captain Morrison's final transmission was a single word, ram. Her ship, dying and flooding, accelerated into one of the alien entities. Major tentacles. The explosion severed the appendage, sending massive chunks of alien flesh raining through the water. But the pressure dropped and her crew were gone dot as the minutes ticked down, more vessels fell. The deep current simply broke apart under the pressure differential, her fusion core containment failing in a brilliant flash that lit up the ocean. The Absol Hunter was crushed by a direct strike from one of the entity's remaining tentacles. With 2 minutes to surface impact, only 3 ocean-class vessels remained functional. Then the Deep Fleet arrived. Admiral Deepwater's biomechanical vessels rose from the depths like sea monsters from ancient myth. Their living hulls rippled with bioluminescent patterns as they accelerated past Vance's remaining ships toward the alien entity. These vessels had been built for this exact scenario, massive, adaptable, crewed by humans who had voluntarily transformed themselves into something capable of operating in any ocean environment. Vance, get your people clear, Deepwater ordered. We're going to show this thing why it never should have poisoned our home. The Deep Fleet vessels engulfed the alien entity like antibodies attacking a virus. Their biomechanical weapons were unlike anything in the conventional fleet-living torpedoes that could adapt to their target, plasma cutters that grew sharper with each use, and boarding pods filled with Marines who had been genetically modified for extreme combat conditions. But it was the Deep Fleet's final weapon that ended the battle, a biomechanical virus designed specifically to target the alien entity's neural network. As it spread through the creature's massive body, the Leviathan-class entity's death throes shook the ocean itself. The creature died 17 meters below the surface, its massive bulk settling onto the continental shelf where it would become an artificial reef. New York City never even knew how close it had come to destruction. 6 months later, Admiral Kestrel Vance stood on the deck of the rebuilt Leviathan, watching as Earth's oceans slowly healed themselves. The bacterial weapon had done its work. Every trace of alien infrastructure had been consumed and broken down into harmless organic compounds. The toxins were gone, replaced by the natural chemistry that had nurtured life for billions of years. But The cost had been enormous. Of the original 47 ocean-class vessels, only 8 survived. 63,000 souls had died in the deep places, their names now inscribed on monuments that would never be seen by surface dwellers. They had died as they had lived in the crushing darkness, defending a world that barely knew they existed. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Commander Hendricks approached, his face bearing the scars of pressure exposure from their final battle. "The Deep Fleet is requesting permission to return to the depths." Vance nodded. Admiral Deepwater's biomechanical vessels had become something beyond human, their crews transformed by genetic modifications and 3 years of life in the deepest trenches. They were still human in spirit, but they belonged to the abyss now. They would remain in the deep places, guardians against future threats from below. "Permission granted," she replied, "and Commander, tell Admiral Deepwater that the surface world owes them a debt that can never be repaid." As the Deep Fleet descended back into the darkness, their living hulls fading into the blue-black depths, Vance reflected on what humanity had learned. They had always been a species of the waterborne from ancient seas, shaped by tides and currents, masters of every aquatic environment from tide pools to oceanic trenches. The Hadal Collective had made the mistake of thinking humans were just another surface species. They had poisoned Earth's oceans believing they were claiming empty territory. Instead, they had awakened something that had been sleeping in the deep places for generations. Humanity's true nature as the ocean's apex. Predator. Captain Torrent Blackfin joined her at the railing, his titanium teeth gleaming in the sunlight. "Ma'am, sonar is picking up something interesting. About to clicks down. There's a structure we missed." "Looks like it might be a communication relay." Vance smiled, feeling the familiar thrill of discovery that had drawn her to the depths decades ago. "Prep a dive team." "Captain, it seems our work in the deep places isn't finished." As the Leviathan began her descent back into the crushing darkness, Vance thought about the surface world above. They would never know the full truth of what had happened in the depths. Politicians would claim credit, scientists would publish papers, and the media would move on to the next crisis. But in the deep places, humanity's true guardians would remain vigilant. They had learned that Earth's greatest threats might not come from the stars, but from the crushing depths beneath their feet. And they would be ready. The ocean had always been humanity's greatest frontier, and now it was their greatest responsibility. They had poisoned Earth's waters, thinking they were conquering them. Instead, they had awakened the children of a water world and learned why the deep places belonged to humanity. The Leviathan descended into the darkness, her hull lights fading into the blue-black depths where Earth's true protectors waited in the crushing silence. In the abyss, humanity had found not just their greatest enemy, but their greatest destiny. They were the ocean class, and the deep places were their domain.